Chapter 7, The One That Counts. I thought back to the dawn of 2018, familiarizing with online interactions. I remembered receiving new invitations to homes all around the country. I remember feeling the world had opened up in front of me. I remembered that first spark of an idea to travel and experience life. I pulled into Dean's driveway in Aurora, Colorado. It was 2.5 years after I was first invited to see Dean. I thought back to how foreign the invitation had felt as I sat in my living room in Ohio and interacted with Dean. I thought how so much had happened between the night Dean had invited me to see him and that current evening in mid-2020 as I stepped from my car to walk up Dean's driveway. I stayed the night at Dean's house, but I left after breakfast early in the morning. I plan to see Dean again on my return from New Mexico. The pink and red sky of the sunrise over Aurora, Colorado that morning was beautiful. I recorded video after I filled up my car's gas tank. I then headed south, away from the Denver metro area. The mountains outside of my passenger side windows were constant as I drove south on I-25. I was driving parallel to the eastern edge of the Rocky Mountains. The snow-peaked caps of the tallest mountains loomed high above. The wall of natural beauty extended as far north and south as the eye could see. Some of those largest mountains were 14ers. Colorado had more peaks above 14,000 feet than any other state. As I approached Colorado Springs, the wall of mountains to the west crept ever closer to the highway. As I passed through the city, mountains on the eastern ridge of the Rockies popped up on both sides of the road. Colorado Springs was split by the highway. I exited I-25 on the west side of the road. I followed the exit up and around the curves, onto the elevated surface streets of Colorado Springs. My view from the eastern side of the city consumed my thoughts. I sought a vantage point to overlook the highway below, out to the wall of mountains beyond. A parking lot outside a strip of shops was the right location. I pulled in and I parked facing out over the highway below. It was a great spot with a spectacular western-facing view of the Rocky Mountains. It was the perfect spot to spend a couple hours doing drugs, enjoying the scenery, and interacting online. After an hour of hot rails, I reached a point in a conversation where I knew my perfect location wasn't perfect for what was about to transpire. I knew I needed to find somewhere slightly further up the mountain, a more secluded area. I packed up my drug paraphernalia and pulled out of the parking lot. I took the winding road higher up onto the mountain, away from traffic and people in the busier and more populous section of Colorado Springs. I found another parking lot which suited my needs. I picked up my phone after I put on a shirt. I wanted to check the map. When the map came up, I saw something interesting. I'd heard of Pike's Peak despite having never been in close proximity. I wasn't even sure why I knew things about the mountain. I learned something else as I looked at the map while I sat in my car on a mountainside in Colorado Springs. I learned I was within half hour's drive to the base of Pike's Peak. There were storm clouds around some random spots in the mountains in both directions to the horizon. From what I could see, most of the peaks were sunny. I tried to figure out which peak was Pike's Peak. My vantage point was particularly good. I managed to sort out the many mountains in my frame of vision from the opposite side of I-25. The mountain which I determined to be Pike's Peak, towering into the sky beyond shorter peaks, was clearly visible in the sunshine. A wave of excitement hit me with the breeze blowing through my car windows. I had my plans for the day. I drove down from the mountainside on the eastern side of I-25. I drove through the commotion of mid-morning Colorado Springs to the west. Within 5 minutes, the world around me shifted completely. I had just been in the center of Colorado Springs, surrounded by buildings, pavement, people, and cars. I had just been waiting at stoplights while people walked around and drove all around me. I had just been in a heavily populated and trafficked urban location, surrounded by businesses and residences. All it took was 5 minutes of driving for my entire world to become something else entirely. When I reached the point where the city abruptly stopped, nature took over with an impressive and astounding switch of environment. Pine trees and forests, giant red rocks and roadside drop-offs alluding to the base of a wild mountainous region. Flowing cascading water, cliffs as high up as I could see, sharp curves on steep inclines kept me at full attention. I was suddenly in the Rocky Mountain wilderness. The complete shift all around me came fast. My brain was still adjusting when I realized I was quickly ascending in elevation. I had to give more gas to my car's engine. I was angled back as I climbed upward into the mountains. I didn't have a full tank of gas, but I figured I had enough to summit Pike's Peak. By the time I reached the entranceway gate of the mountain, I had already ascended well above the city. I could no longer see any remainder of civilization besides the road and the traffic also heading up to the top of the mountain. To the left, there was a parking area at the gate to the summit of Pike's Peak. Shuttle buses were loading up passengers and dropping others off in the parking lot. I passed the loading area. I paid money at the gate to drive myself to the top. I recorded video through my front windshield as the gate in front of me lifted to allow my car through. I read the signs on the side of the road and I mentally prepared my drug-filled brain for the drive. I passed a lake early on in the drive, then I crossed a bridge. There was a forest all around me. I kept climbing higher. As time passed, my shoulders began to ache from the constant motion of the steering wheel. My ankle began to cramp from the constant adjustment of the gas pedal. Periodically, especially around corners, the view above the surrounding world was mesmerizing. I kept climbing higher. A while later, I saw a stop point in the road ahead. It was a checkpoint. I pulled up to one of the workers standing on the side of the lane. For me to continue ascending the mountain, it was mandatory that they check my car's brakes. The worker explained what was coming up on the drive. Though the distance remaining to reach the summit of Pike's Peak was only a small fraction of the distance I had just driven, I was warned it was going to take me a longer amount of time. The road was about to become much steeper and I was about to encounter many more turns which were much sharper and more dangerous. My brakes passed the test and I left the checkpoint. I drove straight forward from the checkpoint. The trees lining both sides of the road were thick. I couldn't see anything beyond them. The road curved again, up and around, and suddenly I was above the tree line. I could see to the ends of the world. I could see the deeper blue in the atmosphere above the curvature of the horizon. Beyond the endless sea of mountains, I saw above everything. I saw where heaven came down and met with earth. I smiled. My choice to summit Pike's Peak was the correct choice. Once I crossed over to that strange world above the tree line, it felt like I was in an alien environment. The ground towards the top of the mountain was otherworldly, tan rocks of all sizes. It was the entire environment up above the trees and clouds. The top section of Pike's Peak was barren and uniform, and it was amazing. The road, as I was warned, became immediately and drastically more treacherous. My car struggled at the angle of incline. The curves bent back completely toward the opposite direction from which I approached them. I could see the winding road crisscrossing directly above me. I drove straight for a stretch, then I curved up and around. I was then driving another straight stretch, but in the opposite direction. The curves had to be taken blind around some of the rock structures on the side of the mountain. Some locations, where possible, had small sections of guardrails. Mostly, though, the road wasn't wide enough for guardrails. The ascending lane and descending lane were in a space just big enough for only the two lanes. The sheer drop-offs where the pavement of the lane ended were open air to thousands of feet below. I loved it. My Lexus did not. Earlier on the drive, I passed through a layer of clouds. The sky was clear when I reached the final curve to the parking location at the summit of Pike's Peak. A parking attendant directed the line of cars to different open spaces in the parking rows. I was amazed at how many cars were parked in the rocks and gravel at the top of the mountain. I found a spot 4 rows into the lot and I parked. My car had been smoking from under the hood since I reached the parking attendant. I turned off my car and popped the hood. When I opened the hood, it created a plume of smoke, the only cloud at the summit of Pike's Peak. The coolant in the tank was boiling. I knew the engine was far too hot to attempt to find the problem. I closed the hood and got back in my car. It was cold at the top of the mountain and it was windy. I pulled out a jacket from one of my bags. I opened another bag. I set up the tray and poured a line of crystal onto it. I heated the end of a glass stem with my propane torch. I put the cool end of the pipe in my nostril. I plugged my other nostril with my fingers against the side of my nose. In a sweeping motion, my head went down across the tray. The hot end of the pipe, barely above the line of crystal, vaporized the crystal as I sucked it up into my nose. I then blew out the largest cloud at the summit of the mountain, except the cloud which was still escaping from under my hood. The drugs hit fast. The feeling overshadowed my worry about my mechanical issues. I decided, as I zipped up my drug equipment and placed the bag back underneath my seat, I wasn't going to let my car problems dampen an experience I knew was about to be amazing. I got out of my car and put on my jacket. I knew I was about to create memories. I left my car to cool off and I began to hike up the rock incline to reach the peak of the mountain. The air was thin and I was out of breath constantly. Every few steps I had to stop to catch my breath. I was breathing heavily as I walked up towards the summit. I made it up and around the final rock formation, and suddenly I was standing on the summit of Pike's Peak trying to catch my breath. People were wandering around up on the rocks. Some were standing still, taking in the amazing 360-degree view of infinity. Others were taking pictures and recording video. I began taking pictures and recording video as well. It was amazing to be able to stand at the top of the world and look out over all of creation. I appreciated every minute I spent up there. I knew the drive down the mountain would be beautiful and treacherous and hard on my brakes if my car even started again when I went to leave. I didn't care. I was again in a timeless moment. It all made sense.